The following panel, we will be able to listen the experience of two countries. Mexico, with the topic emission of sovereign bonds linked to the Sustainable Development Goals, and Paraguay, with the topic of linking the objectives of sustainable development to the budgetary programs. The moderator of this session will be Elisa Aguirre Téllez, General Director of Multilateral Forums and Bilateral Forums of Economic Cooperation in the Secretariat and Public Credit. Good morning to everybody. It's a pleasure to be here with you in this forum of governmental accountants of Latin America. We'll start this panel. We will share the experiences of countries about the public sustainability from public policy. First, from the debt issuance in Mexico, and the second from Paraguay in the budget scenario. And we will have the participation María del Carmen Bonilla, Head of Public Credit and in charge of International Affairs, who will talk about the Mexican experience in the issuance of sovereign bonds linked to SDGs. And María del Carmen, besides being the Head of International Affairs, was the Head of Budget in the same entity. María del Carmen I apologize for the interruption. María del Carmen was the General Director of that same entity. She was in charge of managing the federal public debt portfolio and also the internal and external market management. She has an experience of more than 16 years in the financial sector. She was the coordinator of investments in the Social Security Institute in 2020, achieving 283 billion pesos in assets. In the private sector, she was the operator of derivatives in banks of HSBC and Santander. She has a bachelor's degree in corporate finances and also corporate banking studies from the Anáhuac University. And she has a diploma from Stock Exchange Market and member of the Female Financial Society. And also, Mrs. Agüero was the public accountant from the Ministry of Paraguay, and she will talk about the experience of this secretariat linked to the SDGs and budget. María Teresa is a head of the Department of Finance in Paraguay and General Director of Public Accountancy from 18 years ago. She is an accountant, and she has experience in investment portfolio management, and she has a diploma from Asunción University, and also she has a diploma from Washington, D.C. World Bank, and also she has studies of accountancy and other diplomas from Madrid, España University, and a postgrad degree from UNA Asunción University. And she gives classes in many universities in specialization and master's degree since 4 years ago, and she has experience in accounting sectors, and she has experience in the implementation of many programs in the Secretariat. Nowadays, she is the administrator of Spear Open Data, and it is an appliance in order to report to the citizens about the public budget in Paraguay. She has been supported by international entities, and she is in the middle of the implementation NICS-SP and evaluating the impact and the concrete results of this. In 2016, she was the Director of Public Policies Implementation in Latin America. Having introduced the panelists, I will give the floor to each speaker, and we will have a Q&A session at the end, as in the previous sessions. María del Carmen, please, you have the floor. Thank you very much, Laura, for the introduction. Good morning to everybody. I would like to talk about the experience of Mexico in the issuance of the sovereign bonds linked to the development goals, sustainable development goals. And for that, we will start with my presentation. The emerging markets in Latin America have marked a new trend in the issuance of sovereign bonds in relation to the SDGs, in spite of the challenges that we have in developing countries to have access to sustainable energies. This is a commitment of the private sector and public sector in order to reach the goals that were stated in the Paris Treaty and in the Agenda 2030. As innovator in sustainable financial motors, Mexico has advanced in its commitment for the social and environment achievement goals. And in order to comply with the SDGs and the strategies of investors, in order to carry out the highest impact investment, we think not only in the capacities of the development countries, but also in the implementation of the different investment projects in the capital and framework. In this first slide, I want to explain to you what is the context of the reference framework. In the case of Mexico, we decided to link 100% to the SDGs because we think that as emerging economy of an average income source, it is important to focus on the climate change and in the social environment. In this sense, our reference point has 4 pillars. The first pillar talks about the inclusion. We were pioneers in including these in order to issue bonds and achieve the compliance worldwide that allows to issue sustainable bonds depending on the budget. And this is validated by the International Capital Market Association, and the principles are linked to the issuance of new bonuses. And this innovating technology allows us to align the federal budget with the SDGs. That is, the perspective of Mexico is to identify the budgetary lines, and through them, we will check the contribution that we have marginally or totally to the achievement of one of the objectives. The second pillar, and going deeper into the reference framework, is the combination of the program in the geospatial combination. We only choose the budget programs in very poor areas and vulnerable areas, and these allow us to go to the basis of the pyramid and see how we're going to use contributions at the long term with the highest impact. In relation to governance, I want to say that this methodology, what it allows is to have intersecretarially the executive committees to comply with the objectives 2030, and also we will get the external validation from different entities, and of course the national program for the SDGs of the United Nations will issue constantly information and reports on this framework. And we will have a third party who will be validating that all these budget expenditures comply with the objectives that are in the reference framework. That will allow us that our reports can be more robust and with more information. Here, and if you can scan the QR code, you will get an idea of what is our reference framework. In the following slide, we will want to emphasize the geospatial criteria. That is one great innovation for which Mexico has been awarded for 2 consecutive years some awards, and they are linked to the constitution of this reference framework. It is based on a solid making decision process, and it means that we have many filters. Every filter includes the incoming budget that is allocated annually by the Congress, and it must include productive activities and have one contribution to the compliance with the SDGs, and have operation guidelines or guidelines clear enough to eradicate assets that could have a negative impact, or that it will not be a program that could be perpetuated infinitely throughout the time. And we have also the Pareto principle. It is very, very important. And we will eradicate those without the significant budget or that will be susceptible for cancellation. With that, we achieve a medium and long-term impact. And the geospatial criteria talk about the social expenditures that will be applied to the drawback of social development. This is constituted by Coneval. Coneval is an independent agency of the federal government that evaluates the programs and projects at a national level. And we also have the support of the INEGI, that is the Institute of Geographical and Statistic Information of Mexico. And here I want to talk about the different eligible categories. We adhere both to the social SDGs and the green SDGs. And in this case, we link to the IGMA criteria. Practically speaking, we are covering the subsidies for the production of small and medium agricultural producers. We also include education, health, digital payment systems, and on the green side, we cover infrastructure for potable water treatment, intelligent networks development, and other programs that can generate energy efficiency. We also include different types of transportation, multimodal platforms that are used to contribute to the energy efficiency. And the management of sustainable management of hydrographic basins, national parks, and conservation of wildlife. The most relevant here is that Mexico today contributes in 11 to the 17 SDGs. And in the future, we are trying to implement 1% to the budget that can be increased throughout the time, and that the issuance and bonuses allow us to be more greener. And as soon as we standardize the information towards the future, we will be able to incorporate those risks related to the non-compliance with the objectives, and will be incorporated in the balance sheet in the future. And here I will talk about the market topics. And here I want to tell you about the development. We are very happy because the development of the sustainable curve in Mexico has been quick. In the last 1 year and a half, we achieved a peak. And we started with sustainable issuance bonus in euros that were issued in 2021, and that allows us to go into the European market. That market has very much progress in the regulatory framework, but not only that, it has a mindset of all the investors in relation to where the criteria of investors were moving. So from these issuances of bonuses, we identified that it was very relevant to have access to the local market because at the end of the day, if we want to mobilize the capital, we thought that the financial market will be a joint venue of the development bank and the social and private carpets, and having a reference point will help us to align the process and the prices. And therefore, as the development banks and the commercial banks are the ones that help us to potentialize credits in the economy and have local funds, it was necessary to have an issuance in the local market, and that also allows to have in March of this year the construction of bonus G in pesos, and now we have three notes in the curve. In August 2022, we had an operation in the North American market where we also put one reference point to 10 years under this new reference framework. And also in August of the same year, we issue the yen bonuses. And that has been quick, the quickest that we have experienced because we were able to list 5 nodes. We put the node of 3, 5, 10, 15, and up to 20 years. And it was very well received by Japanese investors. And this will allow us in the future of generating future references, and any other issuer of bonuses that wants to align to these type of strategies can do it very easily. And the price discovery can be easier as soon as they want to access the market. And now I'll talk about the report of impact assignment and how all the information is collected. I think that the big challenge of building this information system is the systematization of information and have it in a repository that will allow you to measure everything throughout the time. Well, we have been working with INEGI, as I told you, precisely to set standardized metrics, and also with the help of all the recommendations of Coneval and with external perspectives of UNDP, that is an observer, well, it has allowed us to improve the quality of our information. Obviously, it is a very complex process, but it is not impossible. And we think that as soon as we standardize this, not only for Mexico, but for the rest of the countries, the investors will have a clear idea of what type of assets or what quality of assets needs to be invested in and under which standards. Here you have the QR if you want to see the report. I also want to tell you Mexico is working very hard in building taxonomies because we consider that the market is relevant, but also we think that the market needs to go hand by hand with minimum standards. In this sense, we are exerting many efforts with multilateral agencies and civil society groups and other scientific groups in the local area to start setting up the benchmarks or those parameters that will allow us to determine which assets complies with these objectives and which ones are not complying. In Mexico, we're going to attack not only the green part, where we are following the best European practices, but also we will focus on the social side. And in the first stage, we will cover the gender topic. And finally, I want to convey to you some ideas. The governmental accountants of Latin America play an important role to reach the optimal management of resources. Our countries have a lot of green bonuses and assets. And it is very important that we do a good accountancy and an efficient management of these resources. And also, I want to tell you that we have done many efforts in financial disclosures in IFRS for the COP. Although for governmental accountants, maybe many entities are not obliged, but this is a best practice and it's a good way to standardize the quality of information and the quality of reports. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, María Carmen. There's no doubt that issuing sustainable bonuses aligned to the SDGs is an international benchmark. You also mentioned other initiatives. So I see very clearly that everything goes aligned in the activities of the Secretariat. Thank you. Continuing with our program, let's listen to the Director General Díaz. María Teresa, please, you have the floor. Good morning to all of you. María, and that means, how are you in Guarani? I have the great pleasure to share with all of you, after almost 3 years of confination, where we didn't meet each other physically. I think that all attendees have survived the pandemic. So first of all, I want to thank God for making us possible to come here healthy and sharing the focal once again, that focal that we all love. So many concerns that suddenly have the accountants in our daily activities, and this meeting allows us to share our experiences, to tell our headaches to other accountants, and see how we can solve many issues and that represent challenges. Besides the accounting international standards in the public sector, we need to see the sustainable reporting. And the lecture that I had proposed initially for this forum was what in a certain way we were doing with our reengineering process for SIAF, and it is related to the goods and assets. Well, now I deviated to the sustainable reporting. Here I want to share with you how we're facing and how we are evaluating the public budget and how it is contributing in a certain way to the achievement to the SDGs, that all our countries in a certain way have included them in their political, social agendas, and we believe that is also an important contribution to follow up the SDGs. Reading the guideline, because in fact this is a work not only from the direction of accounting, it also falls in the budget department that is in the same Secretariat of Treasury and Public Credit. So it's a work that all of them have done after 2 years, and they have set the link to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. So I want to share the stages that we follow without going into detail due to the brief time, but I want to share with you how we face the challenge. Before starting my presentation, I want to thank Juan for preparing this wonderful event, for the dinner, the delicious meals that we are all sharing, and knowing more about the Mexican culture and sharing with all our colleagues. Of course, without leaving behind the bodies that are with us, the IDB, the International Monetary Fund, and the accountants, the IFAC, that is always with us in these kind of forums. So let's start. The presentation, of course, I will not talk about the Agenda 2030, it is not the objective, but here at the national level, we face certain links and to compile more information on this regard. It is important to tell you that we have a certain advantage versus other countries, and it is that our CIAF, that is the Financial Integrated Administration System, has all the entities of the public sector. And I refer not only to the central administration with the three powers of the state, but also we have the public companies, the financial companies, the Central Paraguay Bank, the Social Security Institute, the National University. Everything related to these institutions are in the national budget, and therefore they are inside our CIAF. This work, of course, didn't put the municipalities, and I think that is one challenge because we need to quantify them as countries, because also the municipalities are contributing to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. So I think we will need at a national level to work with municipalities and compile from there more information and consolidate the information of the public sector of our country. Of course, with all this, we can understand how the national budget of the country is contributing to the achievement of every sustainable development goal. After 2 days of presentations, I think that irrespective of these sustainable development goals that are the Millennium Objectives, all our countries have always worked with a social agenda that included these objectives of development goal. So, which country has not worked to fight poverty or to improve education, improve health, improve social health? Well, this agenda is the constitution of all the activities of the countries, because all the countries have worked on these areas. Basically, this work, as I mentioned, started in 2017. There was a resolution from the Ministry of Treasury, the Resolution 444, where basically what it stated was the implementation and the links with each of the budgetary program of the public sector. It is a broad sector. Maybe you notice it. Our national general budget include entities that generally other countries do not include. Generally, they do not include a central bank or the public companies or the financial entities and the social institutes. And in Paraguay, we include them. So the vision with which we work for 2 or 3 years was to make the links of all these budgetary links in the public sector. So we started in 2017, and basically everything is linked with each of the objectives. So what is the novelty besides this work? Well, in this administration, we have started to work on the activities against the climate change. We are working with the Ministry of Agriculture, and as we were saying in the previous panel, Treasury doesn't have all the information. And as the Ministry of Treasury has some attributes. And I can dare to say that is kind of coercive when we deal with the compilation of information, as it is under the general budget of the country, and as the Ministry of Treasury allocates resources and allocates budget to all autonomous entities, then we are able to work on that, and the entities in a certain way, see the relevance of reporting information that is related to the achievement of these Sustainable Development Goals. So we are starting to work with the Agricultural Secretariat, and the Budget Department is in fact working with it. And we have planned a new methodological guideline in order to measure and evaluate the investment and budget. And this is a very recent news. On PEFA, we are paying an evaluation visit, and it's called PEFA because besides the traditional PEFA, they are adding up all the activities related to the climate change and the gender issues. So they will be with us 1 month.
The results are going to be public by next year, approximately during February, we were being told. So reality is that we're receiving a lot of visits, in this case, from different international agencies. We see what Paraguay is doing in correlation to many other actions that are correlatable to the objectives of the millennium, making them sustainable. We're talking about being transparent, re-engineering our systems, our CIAF, we call it CIARE, you know, that's our system. And our agenda is pretty tight. Just to put it in words, you know, it's tight because we have many assessments. We had to run through it all and answer the reports of sustainability. We were one of the countries that were part of the survey. We were interviewed. We're in that perfect storm. We're creating diagnostic data reports at country level, at least. Well, we're going to see briefly this slide. Thanks to the links with each program, a budget that integrate the general budget plan for our nation. In this slide, you can see the closure of fiscal year 2021. The investments that took place are classified in correlation to objectives in the slide. And this is, I'm going to be redundant though. We analyzed the information from year 2022. Our country is contributing on one side in the healthcare field. In all our countries amidst the pandemic, we know that we have had to prioritize and allocate budget to the healthcare sector. And all the countries, I think we've done a good job. We're trying to contain amidst the pandemic. You know, it's been so difficult for the whole world. Now, the other objective that we have, and we've been contributing, and you can replicate what we've done in this exercise and compare it to 2022, we see objective 16, that's peace, justice, solid institutions. And of course, the SDGs, number 1, is the fight of, we want to eradicate famine and poverty. We know that when we kicked off this effort, this work, we created a methodology which was launched in 2021. This methodology correlates to the government budget program that leads us to look back. We have reports that date back to 2017. And of course, we have data of the present. Each entity contributes and is working to achieve those Millennium Goals, right? So in this slide, I have the reports. They're part of the CF, our system. They've been uploaded. It's part of the reporting system of accounting entries. With CF, we see the matrix spreadsheets, the execution or exercise of budget that has its entries. We have the record with the reports in correlation to the budget programs and the Millennium Goals. We can obtain daily results and information based on this. There's many options, as you see in the slide, considering the initial budget, how it was scheduled or how it was exercised and ratified based on our laws and regulations. We have the budget that's in effect. and it correlates to any budget modifications, and the exercise of the budget is there because you see the expenditure in those reports in the slide, only for you to visualize them. So you can see what appears in the matrix of our system called CF. And basically, in this slide, you see the dates. Before I sent my presentation, I sent these dates of the budget execution from August, and you can see the trends and the sustained trends, because we know that health is still the sector of priority of budget, as you can see, in correlation to the Millennium Goals as well. So what permits our methodologies implementation? First, we need to know how every entity or agent contributes to achieve those Millennium Goals. You might ask yourselves, when I started my research, from the initial stages, and to create this slideshow, I had to specify that an agency contributes to one objective. Now, I mean, there's programs, and those programs depend on specific executions. And each execution can lead us a step forward to achieving the Millennium Goals. We have the programs, we have the mission, visions, and objectives in correlation to the exercise of our budget that should lead us to results in our country. This made this correlation possible. We need to know where we allocate investment on a day-to-day basis if we want to obtain the data to see how every entity or agent contributes at country level. At that scale, we are working to achieve those Millennium Goals of sustainability. I'm going to explain this briefly. Of course, I know that we don't have sufficient time to explain everything down to detail, but these are the steps to follow in the slides in correlation to the Millennium Goals with the exercise of budget of governments. There's 7 steps. First, of course, the first step led us to work with each entity. As I told you, we had a mission, vision, and objectives with each entity. And we have to, first of all, acknowledge that the methodology that's been uploaded in our website is there. I know that I have a few minutes left. They're telling me that, so I'll share the slide fast. I'll explain. This basically relates to the objectives, goals, and their classification, being it functional, because each entity contributes. We worked in each field. We have a logical framework, as we call it, the conceptual logical framework, because each entity has a function that's correlated to each budgeted program. And that's the flow. We work that way. We studied each program. We analyzed if the programs were aligned, if they had strategic objectives in alignment to achieving sustainable goals. Now here, look at this. With a classification, there's the functionality side of things in each entity, and we know which is our core focus. At the right of the screen, you can see each item or each entity and their contribution to each Millennium Goal. So that's how we have these sub-functions, which are part of our study. And the correlations, I show you these slides too, a bit more. In this slide, you can see how each entity contributes to achieving different Millennium Development Goals. Now, this matrix correlates the information that lives in our system that's called CF. In CF, we can automatically obtain financial reports and information and correlate these objectives with a functional characterization of each entity that contributes in correlation to a budgeted program. This step also, that had to be done. We had to go through an assessment. We had to see if the program was really contributing directly or indirectly or across each sector, in this case, to achieve the Millennium Goals. So we had to study each goal, and I mentioned this once again. You can see it in the method, in the guidance instrument, in the one that has the guidelines, so you see how we executed all our tasks. In this slide, you have what we weighed, what we pondered, what we had to analyze in such a way, because each program would contribute directly, indirectly, or across all sectors. Or we measured the percentages of contribution in such a way that we measured how each program leads us a bit closer to achieving the Millennium Goals. Based on this, we had to go through a decision-making process. If they were across all sectors, if the decisions were direct or indirect, and we worked with each entity or stakeholder. And here, you see in this slide, you see how the data correlates. Just as an example of reference, it's interesting. In the Ministry of Treasury, we have many programs, like a government program that subsidizes the elders, our seniors. And you see that's part of the activities or initiatives of the Ministry of Treasury. It's part of the activities of our sub-ministry. And the program that I mentioned is correlating to other Millennium Goals. So that program correlates to that budget, and that program correlates to the Millennium Goals. We weighed, pondered things, and created this along with a method. Now, this basically, in this slide, you can obtain information from it. My presentation is going to be there too. And I'll make a final announcement. I believe that each economy is working in creating these correlations of reports, of information, and to measure how we're contributing to achieve the Millennium Goals. I want to clarify the following. Now, taking the hat of accountant or government official off, or representative of the Ministry of Treasury, I'll take that hat off and I'll put this hat on. I think all our countries have gone through a major effort. It's been extraordinary. We're trying to achieve the Millennium Goals on one hand, and on the other hand, we know that the citizenship sometimes is not at ease. Our citizenship is not happy. We know that in the agenda, we have to listen to different ideologies. My country is highly traditional. It's Paraguay, of course. So you'll see that we're very customary in our identity, in our culture, in our traditions, in our values. Very traditional. So there's like the pre-establishment, we ask, God for help, and we're focused in our core, which is the family and our nation. We have our general acts, laws, and regulations, and we know it's going to be difficult to modify specific ideologies or incorporate new ideologies in our country. Our country is resilient. We survived a terrible war, which almost exterminated us. We moved forward apart from that situation. We're a country constituted by 7 million in population. Our culture is highly into tradition. We're very customary. We're in compliance with a global agenda, but those issues, or there's moments in which our country might express its agreement or disagreement. And I mean, the citizenship might not be in conformity with certain activities, but that's what it is. We've already installed what we need to install. We're going to work on our agenda and to find ways and continue contributing. And somehow we know our country and all our countries are working with this agenda. Fundamentally, this agenda has social impact and sustainable goal achievement in it. So I just made that final announcement in Guarani, and I'll translate Guarani. My farewell. From Guarani, I'll translate it. Okay, 1 second. Thank you very much. It's Agüero. That's how I say thank you very much in Guarani. Opavade, Pellezareco Jaweri. Thank you all for your attention. Thank you once again. General Director, thank you so much for sharing your experience about how you correlated your nation's budget with the Millennium Goals. Thank you for sharing your broad thoughts and scope of your thoughts. Thank you for explaining your system, your COF, so that effort has its specifics. Thank you for sharing your system's experience. We have compiled so many questions from the public. We're going to start asking the questions that are a bit lead us to analyze matters with curiosity. The next question is from Mexico. They ask us, how do you mark the difference between the type of budget that you have allocated? And what type of metrology or metrics do you use to measure the success of your programs? The submitted reports that validate, and talk to us about the validating reports correlating to the programs. Of course, the process is similar to the process that has just been explained by our counterparts. We're trying to analyze the level of contribution of each action with the objectives in correlation to the exercise of our budget. Depending on those functions, we establish parameters or metrics to assess performance, the key performance indicators. So that department analyzes in a very punctual way. They review and compile the information that the ministry sent to us in their reports. Likewise, when we execute, the authorities that execute the tasks are the ministries. We receive all of the information and reports, and based on the National Statistics Agency of Mexico, that's called INEGI, it's an autonomous agency. They obtain statistics and new information that we ask of it to provide. We obtain information from Coneval, that's a government agency that's not, that works independently. We cross-reference the information that we've received to have clarity and know what path are we walking down to achieve those goals, and what's factual and pardon the ad here. You just mentioned this entity submitted a report about the progress to measure the SDGs, and in the case of Mexico, the rating. In that study has determined that Mexico has progressed. And that we've worked with systematized information. Thank you, María Carmen. So you've worked with INEGI and Coneval, both government agencies that are independent who assess policy and work with statistics. Thank you so much, María. María Teresa, they're asking you as a Paraguay representative, which analysis or metrology do you implement to know if the investment that's been allocated to impact the SDGs has an impact? Are we working on fighting together to eliminate poverty, for example? I don't have right now all the detail, but follow your methodology. Study the guidelines. I want to say that there's a method, and the guiding instrument uses Mexico as a case of reference, and the Argentinian context is also used as a case of reference. There's a method. You have the guidelines. We ponder, we weigh, we study each budgeted program that's kicked off in every institution to see and measure how each program contributes for us to develop and achieve the sustainable goals. So we ponder things, we estimate and create a matrix of data that's correlated, that makes us visualize the functionality of each agency involved. We work with these indicators, parameters, and create reports thanks to CF, to our system, that's the reporting software. We can obtain daily information, and I must mention the particularities of it. Each entity that's part of it sends the information to CF, and they reside in CF and make our work possible. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but I know that maybe this question is going to be asked. I mentioned this too. The next step is to analyze local government reporting or information, because they contribute. In our local governments, they are divided into sub-departments. They report their sources of information. We need the method used and the guiding instruments. It's very important to implement that for the public sector in our country. So the next steps are leading us to obtain government information at a municipal level in a format of report, analyzing the questions a bit more. And I follow these lines of investigation. When you're thinking about these issues, deepen in the following points. Number one, deepen. I'd like to ask you, which are the important challenges you face? We've seen the benefits, but how do we analyze the cross-crop agenda in each sector to achieve the goals? You're exercising your budget. It's the revenue, and you're exercising it, but we're including those sub-national local offices in your reports too. But not only am I going to talk about the Millennium Goals, that lead us to development, as I've said. I mean, we have parameters, metrics, and exercise the budget of our nation. We have those reports, and we can be exact. We can be very precise. We can see how our country is contributing to that. And that's part of our agenda. And I know that we might be worried a bit. And I see that, I mean, we're working together as countries. I mean, but the first investment or the budget that's allocated or destined to, I think we've destined 30 or 35% of our GDP or the budget is allocated to the sector of health. Since we've been talking about making things sustainable, we've invested a lot, incurred in debt. And I congratulate Mexico in your context. I've been surprised. I mean, I know that Mexico, amidst the pandemic, did not have to incur in debt to improve their healthcare sector. The majority of economies did incur in debt. I mean, we need to sustain the levels of investment in the healthcare sector. We have to do that. At this time, we can't think about looking abroad to find some loans. We have to generate real, genuine assets to keep the level of investment in our country and allocated in the healthcare sector. That's part of the challenges that we're facing in my country, in Paraguay, not just my country, in the world. We need to continue investing in health. We need to protect the other sectors and the Millennium Goals, the rest of the Millennium Goals. That worries us. We're amidst a reform in my country. We're reforming laws of education. Our people's safety is also an issue. Climate change is also a very interesting subject. There's so much to deal with, and if we try to balance things out, find that middle ground, that balance for sustainability and the exercise of budget exercise here is one of the main objectives. And the challenges that we currently face are these. That's what our countries have to deal with. María Carmen, could you answer the same question with your perspective? Which are the challenges? Because in similarity, you've spoken about sovereign bonds. How difficult is to incorporate the Millennium Goals in what you do on your everyday tasks when reporting your financial stance? And as Laura mentioned, thank you. Yes, I think that obtaining information is crucial. That's the core theme. We need to normalize, to standardize our databases, have databases that are granular, that could lead us to analyze the municipal and state entity levels. If it's reliable quality data, it helps us create reliable reports. It is a challenge. The countries involved not necessarily have the way to build reports or this information. Without doubt, it must be done, though. And let's say that if we move forward, what's going to be interesting in that future is how we're going to link taxonomies, norms, regulations, international standards, and, in the instruments, the different types of instruments that exist in the market, and the bonds, too. The ministries of Treasury have to analyze internally the future risks of not going through the change. If you just budget your sectors with original sources and the rest of the world is very dynamic, trying to achieve those goals, how are you going to incorporate at some point in your spreadsheet and balance sheets and reports those achievements and developments for the Millennium Goals? Because thank you for being so mindful. We thank the chairwoman and the general director of one of the most important agencies in Mexico and Paraguay. We thank you, both panel members. This experience is important to us all. We had a broader vision of our accountants in this panel. We clarified the concept of debt. That's an issue that has its differences in each economy and each ministry. After having listened to you, we have given closure to our panel. Thank you so much. Now we'll continue listening to the president of FOCAL. He will give a token of his appreciation and acknowledgement. This token is for our panel members. Thank you for participating in the 8th edition of FOCAL.